Hello and welcome back to part two. I'm going to focus in now on engaging delivery techniques, which is such an important subject that, to be honest, I could probably talk to you about for several hours rather than just the 10 minutes that I'm going to give you some of my top tips in here. Now, everyone wants to be engaged when they're sat in the audience. No one wants to sit there listening to someone that just isn't engaging at all. And vice versa, we as presenters want to feel like we're engaging our audience. No one wants to stand in front of a room full of people and look around and see, people slumped in chairs with their arms crossed who clearly are just not into what you're there to talk about and deliver. So it goes both ways. The audience wants to be engaged and we want to engage them. It's really, really important that we do that. Now, this little summary on the screen here is really what this section is about. It's not just about what you say, it's about how you say it. And I want you to just take note there of how I just said that. So what I didn't do is I didn't go, engaging delivery isn't just about what you say, it's about how you say it. Zero emphasis on any of the words, zero pauses, zero change in tone. That is non-engaging delivery at its finest. Okay, so if that's you, you're going to get some real benefit out of the next 10 minutes. I'm going to give you some of my top tips because, of course, with anything, any content we're delivering, we want to break the kind of monotony of our audience sitting there listening to someone, which can be a very difficult thing to do. And we can do that by using pauses, by using different tones, by using different pace. So I would say it's not just about what you say, it's about how you say it. And it's really, really important that we deliver messages in that way. That might come really natural to some of you. For others, it might be something you need to work on. So let's dive a little bit deeper. Now, the very first tip I would give you here about engaging delivery techniques is, first of all, we've got to know our audience. Now, if you haven't watched the first video in these 4 video series, I suggest you watch that after this one, because that is all about the importance of knowing your audience. We have to understand what our audience is expecting from our talk, any content that they really need to see, any pain points they're struggling with. But also on a personal note, one thing I didn't mention in part 1, where I focused on knowing your audience, is that we can get to know our audience in terms of the type of demographic they are, the type of business they are, the kind of language they use in their business. We can go into that level of detail as well if we want to, because that might just help us change the way we talk to those people. So as an example for you, I know nothing about cricket, but yet one of our biggest clients is the England Cricket Board. Now, for me, that's been quite a tricky thing because when I deliver training to them and when I'm talking to them about various design, presentation designs that we're building for them, I have to do my best to talk in their language. So I do find myself from time to time, I'm actually on the ECB newsletter as a sort of member of theirs, and I do read that newsletter quite often when it comes through. I think it's like a bi-weekly thing. And I just make sure I know the names of some of the top players. I make sure I know some of the rules. I probably don't know all of them. I just make sure I've got a bit of a handle on what's going on with England cricket at that time. And I don't need to sound like an expert, but at least I can join them in using the same terminology. And they appreciate that. They actually know that I don't know a damn thing about cricket, but they appreciate that I'm trying. So knowing your audience can be on that kind of personal level as well. Now, the second tip I can give you about engaging delivery techniques is dynamic openings. So when you open up your presentation, you don't necessarily just want to fly straight into the content. So first impressions are really, really important when presenting. You might want to give them a compelling story, a surprising fact, or ask them a question. So again, if you watched the very first video in this 4-video series, I gave you a little introduction as to my own experience with presenting. And it was a hard road for me that took many, many years from just being thrown in at the deep end and really struggling to getting to where I am today and still being a work in process. That's the little story I give people whenever I deliver a session like this. Now, if I'm delivering PowerPoint training, I start with a surprising fact. So I'll say something like, does anybody know how many PowerPoint presentations are built every day? Not many people do. The answer is about 30 million worldwide. So that kind of enables me, that blows people's minds, and that kind of enables me then to sort of move into why we're there for the training and how we want to improve our slides and so on. You can also do interactive icebreakers, and I know that word icebreakers feels a bit cringy, doesn't it? I always remember, a good 10, 15 years ago, people used to love a good icebreaker, and I always found them a little bit cheesy, to be honest with you. So you don't have to do anything cheesy at all, but in PowerPoint these days, or online, you can do some really, really nice stuff with interactive polls. So you can use systems like Poll Everywhere or Slido, which are really, really good ways to get your audience to interact. So you can do that in person, which is always fun because people can just do it from their phones. And you can make the question a little bit silly if you want to. So long as it's linked to your content in some way, that's great. Or you could do some kind of quick activity. It's really up to you. But dynamic openings are a great way to engage your audience at the very start. And if you can link it, if there's some kind of synergy between what you're doing there as an opener and the content of your presentation, then that really enables you to kind of segue into the PowerPoint, and they're not completely separate from one another. So I'd encourage you to just have a think about how you start your presentations and whether you can use some of those ideas. Now, the other things to mention, which are probably one of the most important things, are body language and voice modulation. Now, I talked about voice modulation at the start, so I'll focus on body language for now. One of the things you might notice about me right now is I'm moving around a lot, and even though this is a video that I'm recording, I am stood up. I always stand up when I present, even if I'm making a video, even if I'm delivering a webinar or online training, I am always stood up. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I feel, well, I say people in general feel more confident when they're standing rather than sitting. You also are enabling your voice box and your lungs and your larynx to use more oxygen much better. But more importantly, you're using body language much better. So body language makes up over 50% of our communication. And there's all sorts of visual gestures that you develop over time. And I would encourage you to always stand when you're presenting. And this is going to sound really painful now, but I would encourage you to have at least one rehearsal of your presentation on your own and film yourself presenting. Now, you can delete this video afterwards, but the reason I want you to do this is I want you to check out your body language in that video. And be really honest with yourself. Are your arms flat by your side throughout the whole thing? Or are they raised and open rather than closed? Are you crossing your arms? If you're crossing your arms, that's a way of not engaging with your audience. If you open your arms and give open body language, you're welcoming your audience in much more. And there's a whole other day's worth of training around body language. Now, tone and pitch is really, really important. I mentioned this at the start, but again, I just want to kind of emphasize here. If I talk to you in this way, and I'll put my hands by my side so I'm not using body language either. But this is a very monotone way to talk, and I guarantee you that within 5 minutes or less of talking like this to an audience, they will be completely tuned out from your presentation. Whereas if I change the pace of my delivery, if I emphasize words, and if I use those pauses, people will engage with that more. And there's a reason for it. It's not just because it sounds better, there is some science behind it. So when we use tone and pitch in the right way, we actually break our audience's attention. So let me explain what I mean by that. The human brain is a pattern recognition machine. Okay, so if I just go back a couple of steps here in my presentation. So when we're talking monotone, really flat lines, our audience recognizes that as a pattern. And very, very quickly, the brain says, there's not really much going on here. We don't need to be worried about this. We can ignore it. And that's why people tune out. That's why it's so hard to pay attention to someone who talks in a monotone way. But what we can do is by talking and varying our pace, using pauses, emphasizing words, we're breaking that pattern up all the way through our talk. And when we break that pattern, our audience's brains has to stop and go, oh, hang on a second, what's going on here? And they tune back in. So that's the science behind why that works so well. Okay, it's not just about trying to sound good in front of an audience. You're actually breaking the pattern recognition of their brains. Now, my final tip for this is look for real-time feedback. So if you want to engage your audience during your delivery, look for real-time feedback. So again, you can do that with interactive polling systems in your presentation. I'd really recommend one called Slido. It's sli.do. It's a fantastic tool and it slots straight into PowerPoint as well, which is great. And also I'd encourage you to explore what I call conversational presenting. And if you want more information on that, do reach out to me. But essentially that's what my live presentation to you guys was delivered in that way. It was a conversational presentation. And what I mean by that is you get your audience to do the driving. You present them with the content and you ask them what they want to focus in on. So it's a really, really great way to engage them because they feel like they are pushing the agenda. They're not just sat down listening and waiting for the Q&A at the end. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up now with another final statement for you there. So engaging delivery is about connecting with your audience. And hopefully I've given you a few pointers there on how you can raise that level of connection and engagement. Like I said, it's a huge, huge subject. I could talk to you for so much more, but the main thing I would say is to, as it says here just below me, vary your presentation formats. Don't just do what you've always done because you've never had any complaints. Try and vary it. Be more conversational, be more interactive, and vary your verbal communication as well and your non-verbal communication. So vary your body language by standing up and being conscious of that, and your tone and your pace. Vary it, break that pattern in your audience's brains, and you will see that they will pay more attention. So I hope that part 2, engaging delivery techniques, has been useful. In part 3, I'm going to talk about overcoming nerves, which is always an interesting one. So I will see you in a second on the part 3 video.